What if every word you've spoken about money for the past decade has been secretly programming your bank account to stay exactly where it is, or worse, to shrink? What if the financial struggle you're experiencing right now has nothing to do with the economy, your education level, or even how hard you're willing to work, but instead stems from a hidden spiritual frequency that you've been unconsciously broadcasting into the universe every single day? This isn't about motivation or mindset tricks you've heard 1,000 times before. What you're about to discover is something far more profound, far more ancient, and infinitely more powerful. There exists a sacred book, deliberately kept from public awareness for over a century, that reveals the exact mechanism by which your spirit either aligns with wealth or repels it. The financial elite have guarded this knowledge jealously, passing it down through private circles, understanding that whoever masters this spiritual linguistic code holds a power that transcends every conventional wealth-building strategy you've ever been taught. Has this ever happened to you? You wake up each morning with good intentions, you work diligently, you follow financial advice from experts, yet somehow prosperity remains frustratingly out of reach, like trying to grasp smoke with your bare hands. You've probably blamed circumstances, timing, or lack of opportunity. But what if the real culprit has been hiding in plain sight, embedded in the very words flowing from your mouth and the internal dialogue playing on repeat in your consciousness? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what the sacred manuscript reveals that will probably shock you. Your words aren't just expressions of thought or innocent descriptions of reality. They are active commands, vibrational instructions being transmitted directly into the quantum field of infinite potential that surrounds you at every moment. When you say, "I can't afford this," or think money is so hard to come by, you're not simply observing your financial situation. You're literally issuing orders to the universe, commanding it to organize your reality around scarcity, limitation, and struggle. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to learn has the power to completely revolutionize not just your financial situation, but your entire relationship with abundance itself. The wealthy understand something about language and spirit that most people never discover. Prosperity isn't something you chase or work yourself to exhaustion trying to achieve. It's a frequency you align with, a spiritual vibration you tune into through the precise calibration of your words, thoughts, and deepest beliefs. For over 100 years, this sacred knowledge has been circulating quietly among those who recognize its power, while the masses continue operating with a corrupted linguistic code that guarantees poverty consciousness. The question is, are you ready to break free from that programming and learn how to align your spirit with the frequency that wealth naturally responds to? Because once you understand this mechanism, once you see how your words have been either constructing or demolishing your financial destiny, you can never unknow it. And that's when everything begins to shift. The trap most people fall into, and they have absolutely no idea they're even in it, is this. They speak a language of limitation so consistently, so automatically, that it becomes the invisible architecture of their entire financial reality. Think about the phrases that probably rolled off your tongue just this week without a second thought. "I can't afford that." "Money is tight right now." "I'll never get ahead in this economy." These statements feel like you're simply describing the truth of your circumstances, like you're being realistic or responsible about your financial situation. But here's the revelation that changes everything. You're not describing anything. You're actively constructing it, brick by brick, word by word. Every single one of these phrases operates as an energetic command, a vibrational instruction being transmitted into the field of infinite potential. That quantum physics has proven surrounds us at all times. The universe doesn't interpret your words as complaints or observations. It reads them as orders, as blueprints for what you're requesting to experience. When you declare, "Money is tight," you've just placed an order for tightness, for constriction, for continued limitation. The field responds with mathematical precision, organizing circumstances, opportunities, and outcomes to match exactly what you've commanded through your language. This isn't some abstract spiritual concept that sounds nice, but has no real-world impact. This is the actual mechanism by which your reality gets shaped, moment by moment. The wealthy elite, who've guarded this sacred manuscript for generations, understand something crucial. Language isn't neutral. It's never been neutral. Words carry frequency, vibration, creative power, and most people are walking around broadcasting a poverty frequency at full volume, wondering why abundance never seems to find them. They're essentially standing at the door of prosperity, turning the lock in the wrong direction over and over, then complaining that the door won't open. If what we've explored resonates with you, subscribe to this channel. This isn't just motivational content. This is systematic unveiling of how prosperity actually works at the consciousness level. Now, I want to go even deeper into this hidden mechanism, because understanding the problem is only the beginning of your transformation. The sacred text doesn't just expose what's been holding you back. It provides the precise antidote, the exact linguistic formulas that bypass your conscious resistance and reprogram the deepest levels of your subconscious mind. This is where things get really fascinating, because we're not talking about positive thinking or those empty affirmations you've probably tried before that made you feel slightly better for an hour before reality crashed back in. This is something entirely different. The manuscript reveals that wealthy people, whether they consciously understand what they're doing or not, speak in verbal codes that operate on a completely different frequency than the language of limitation. These aren't just prettier ways of saying the same things. They're fundamentally different instructions being sent to the universal field. When faced with something expensive, a person trapped in poverty consciousness automatically says, "I can't afford it," which slams shut the door of possibility and tells their brain to stop looking for solutions. But someone operating in wealth consciousness asks a completely different question. How can I create the resources to acquire this? Do you see the shift? One statement declares powerlessness and limitation. The other opens a doorway, activates problem-solving pathways in the brain, and invites creative solutions to emerge. This linguistic reprogramming works because it operates beneath the level of your conscious awareness, in that vast subconscious territory where 95% of your decisions, perceptions, and behaviors are actually being controlled. Your conscious mind can try all it wants to think positive thoughts or visualize abundance. But if your subconscious is still running programs of unworthiness, scarcity, and limitation that were installed decades ago, the subconscious wins every time. It's like trying to drive forward with the emergency brake engaged. You might move a little, but you're fighting against yourself the entire journey. The sacred manuscript provides specific reformulations, exact phrases designed to slip past your conscious resistance and install new commands directly into your operating system. These aren't generic statements you mindlessly repeat. They're precision tools crafted to target the specific neural pathways that have been keeping you stuck, replacing old limiting programs with expansive ones that align your spirit with the frequency of wealth. This is the hidden truth that changes everything. Transformation doesn't require years of therapy or massive external changes. It requires learning to speak the language that abundance recognizes and responds to. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to reprogram my frequency," if this resonates with you, and you're beginning to see how your own words might have been creating the exact limitations you've been trying to escape. Here's something that might shake your understanding of why you are the way you are. With money, you didn't arrive on this planet with beliefs about financial struggle embedded in your consciousness. No baby is born thinking wealth is scarce or I have to suffer to survive. These convictions weren't part of your original design. They were installed, systematically programmed into your awareness through thousands of repetitions, absorbed from parents, teachers, media, culture, until they became so deeply embedded that you stopped questioning whether they were even true. You simply accepted them as reality itself. Think back to your earliest memories around money. Maybe you heard your parents arguing about bills, voices tense with worry that settled into your nervous system as money equals stress. Perhaps you asked for something at a store and heard, "We can't afford that," so many times it became the soundtrack of your childhood. Or maybe well-meaning adults told you that you'd have to work extremely hard to make anything of yourself, that nothing comes easy, that this world is a harsh place where only the toughest survive. Each of these moments was like a line of code being written into your financial operating system, building the software that's been running your money decisions on autopilot ever since. And here's what's truly unsettling. That operating system is executing its programming with flawless precision right this very moment. It's not broken, it's not malfunctioning, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do based on the code that was installed decades ago. When you automatically assume you can't have something before even investigating possibilities, that's the program running. When you feel anxiety spike at the thought of checking your bank balance, that's the program running. When opportunities for expansion appear and you immediately find reasons why they won't work for you, that's the program running perfectly, protecting you from stepping outside the financial identity it was programmed to maintain. The sacred manuscript reveals something that sounds almost impossible until you understand the mechanics behind it. Money itself operates according to a linguistic code, a hidden language that most people never learn to speak fluently. This code responds not to how many hours you work, not to your level of education or intelligence, not even primarily to your actions. It responds to your declarations, both spoken aloud and whispered silently in the corridors of your mind. The wealthy have either consciously or unconsciously learned this language, and they speak it naturally, which is why resources seem to flow toward them with an ease that baffles those still operating with the default programming. Imagine money as a sophisticated lock, one that requires a very specific combination to open. Most people spend their entire lives turning the dial randomly, trying force, trying different strategies and tactics, wondering why the vault never opens for them. They're using the wrong code. They're speaking a language that money doesn't recognize or respond to. The combination isn't about working harder or sacrificing more or even being smarter than everyone else. The combination is linguistic, vibrational, spiritual. When you speak the right words with the correct energetic frequency behind them, the lock opens almost effortlessly. When you're broadcasting the wrong frequency through limiting language, you could have the technical skills of a master safecracker and still never access what's waiting inside. This is why two people with identical education, similar opportunities, and comparable work ethics can end up in completely different financial realities. One has unconsciously learned to speak the language that wealth responds to, while the other continues broadcasting limitation codes that keep the vault sealed shut. The difference isn't talent or luck or who they know. The difference is the vibrational signature they're transmitting through their habitual language patterns. through the stories they tell themselves about what's possible, through the frequency they've aligned their spirit with day after day after day. Now, what makes this discovery so powerful is that once you become aware of the code you've been using, once you see clearly how your words have been either unlocking abundance or reinforcing scarcity, you gain access to something most people never even know exists: the ability to consciously choose a different combination, to deliberately reprogram your operating system, to align yourself with the linguistic frequency that money recognizes as an invitation rather than a rejection. Write in the comments, "I see the code now," if you're starting to recognize the patterns in your own language that might have been keeping you locked out of the abundance that's been waiting for you all along. What science has discovered in recent decades completely validates what the sacred manuscript has been teaching for over a century. The space around you isn't empty at all. Quantum physics reveals that what appears to be empty space is actually a living, responsive field of infinite potential, vibrating with possibility, waiting to be shaped by conscious intention. And here's where things get absolutely fascinating. When you speak words of scarcity, when you broadcast limitation through your language, you're sending a specific vibrational signal directly into this quantum field. That field doesn't judge your signal as good or bad, right or wrong. It simply receives whatever frequency you're transmitting and goes to work organizing circumstances, opportunities, and outcomes to match your broadcast with absolute precision. This isn't mystical thinking or wishful spirituality. This is observable, measurable reality. Your words create vibrations, sound waves that ripple through the field. Those vibrations carry information, instructions about what you're claiming as your reality. When you declare, "Money is always a struggle for me," you've just sent a clear signal into the quantum field, and that field responds by arranging your experiences to validate that declaration. It brings you situations that confirm struggle, reinforces patterns that make money feel difficult, filters out opportunities that would contradict your stated reality. The field is simply reflecting back to you exactly what you've told it to manifest. The wealthy operate from a completely different linguistic framework, whether they consciously understand the mechanism or not. Listen carefully to how prosperous people talk about money and resources, and you'll notice something striking. They never, and I mean never, use language that confirms limitation or locks doors of possibility. They don't say, "I can't afford it," because that phrase is a command that shuts down creativity, stops problem solving, and broadcasts lack into the field. Instead, they naturally reformulate it as a question: "How can I afford it?" Or they frame it as a choice: "That's not a priority right now, but I could make it one if I wanted to." Do you see the profound difference happening in these linguistic shifts? One statement declares powerlessness and inability, closing the door and telling your brain there's nothing more to explore here. The other opens a pathway, activates your problem-solving capabilities, invites solutions to present themselves. It's not just semantics or playing word games to feel better about yourself. This is fundamental reprogramming of the relationship between your consciousness and the field of infinite potential surrounding you. You're literally changing the instructions you're sending out, which means you're changing what gets reflected back. If this created a shift inside you, that sense of recognition when truth connects, hit that like button. You're declaring energetically that you're aligned with abundance consciousness over limitation. This is why someone with modest resources but wealthy consciousness can create opportunities out of thin air, while someone with significant resources but poverty consciousness will find ways to lose what they have. The external circumstances aren't determining the outcome. The internal frequency, expressed through language, is determining everything. The field responds to what you're broadcasting, not what you wish you were broadcasting or what you pretend to broadcast when others are watching. It reads your authentic signal, the one embedded in your habitual speech patterns and your unconscious internal dialogue. Think about the last time you wanted something but immediately told yourself you couldn't have it. What exact words did you use? Did you say, "I can't afford that," or "that's too expensive for me," or "people like me don't get things like that"? Each of those phrases is a different variation of the same limitation code, and each one sends the field instructions to maintain your current reality of lack. Now imagine if, in that same moment, you had instead said, "That's interesting. I wonder what would need to shift for me to access this." Or, "I'm choosing to prioritize other things right now, but this is possible for me if I decide to pursue it." The entire energetic transaction changes. You've gone from broadcasting impossibility to broadcasting potential. The transformation that's available to you through understanding this mechanism is so much deeper than just changing a few phrases. You're learning to consciously participate in the creation of your reality instead of unconsciously sabotaging yourself thousands of times per day through careless language. You're developing the ability to speak the dialect that abundance recognizes, the frequency that wealth responds to, the code that opens locks you didn't even know existed. And once you start speaking this language consistently, once you align your spirit with the frequency of prosperity through deliberate linguistic choices, the field has no choice but to reorganize itself around your new transmission. Write in the comments, "I choose abundant language," if you're recognizing how your habitual phrases might have been programming scarcity into your reality, and you're ready to start speaking differently. The origin story of this sacred manuscript is as fascinating as the revelations it contains. Over a century ago, there lived a man whose identity has been deliberately obscured from historical records, a man who possessed everything society teaches us to pursue. He had accumulated significant wealth, commanded respect in his community, wielded influence that opened any door he chose to walk through. By every conventional measure, he had mastered the game of prosperity. He was living proof that the system worked, that the traditional path led to abundance. And then, in a single catastrophic event, a financial collapse beyond his control wiped it all away. Not just his fortune, but his identity, his sense of who he was in the world. Everything he thought defined him. Most people in that position would have done one of two things: either spent the rest of their lives bitterly blaming circumstances, drowning in resentment about how unfair the world had been, or immediately tried to rebuild using the exact same methods that had worked before, assuming they just needed to work harder or be smarter next time. This man did neither. Instead, he made a decision that seemed incomprehensible to everyone who knew him. He disappeared. For 7 full years, he withdrew completely from society, not in defeat or depression, but in pursuit of something far more valuable than rebuilding his lost fortune. He wanted to understand the invisible mechanics behind wealth itself, the hidden architecture that determines why some people magnetize abundance while others, despite doing everything supposedly right, remain perpetually struggling. What he discovered during those years of intense contemplation and investigation wasn't another investment strategy or business framework. He uncovered something so fundamental, so revolutionary, that when he finally documented his findings in the manuscript we're discussing, those who first encountered it made a conscious choice to keep it circulating only among select circles. His core revelation was this: wealth doesn't originate in the external world and then move inward to bless certain fortunate individuals. The flow runs in the opposite direction. Prosperity originates from consciousness, from the internal realm of belief and vibration and spiritual alignment, and expresses itself outward into material form. Every dollar that appears in your bank account, every opportunity that crosses your path, Every financial breakthrough you experience is not random chance or reward for hard work. It's a direct manifestation of the vibrational state you've been broadcasting through your words, your thoughts, your deepest beliefs about what you deserve and what's possible for you. This man realized that his original fortune hadn't actually been built by his business acumen or strategic decisions. Those external actions were merely channels through which an internal state of abundance consciousness had expressed itself. When he lost everything, he hadn't really lost his money. He'd lost his alignment with the frequency that naturally attracts money. This revelation completely inverts everything you've been taught about wealth creation. You've been told to focus on the external, get the right education, develop the right skills, make the right connections, work the right number of hours, follow the right strategies. And yes, those things matter, but they're not the source, they're the channels. The source is consciousness itself, the vibrational frequency you're operating at, the spiritual alignment you're maintaining or failing to maintain. You could have access to the best strategies in the world, but if your consciousness is broadcasting poverty, those strategies will fail or produce temporary results that eventually collapse. Conversely, you could have very basic skills and limited resources, but if your consciousness is aligned with abundance, opportunities will present themselves that perfectly match your frequency. This is why the man who lost everything could have rebuilt a fortune if he'd wanted to, and why lottery winners who haven't shifted their consciousness often end up broke within a few years, despite sudden wealth. The external. Money comes and goes, but the internal frequency, the consciousness alignment, determines whether prosperity establishes itself permanently or evaporates like morning mist. What the manuscript teaches, based on this man's profound insights, is that your primary work isn't out there in the world, scrambling for opportunities and competing for resources. Your primary work is internal, aligning your spirit with the frequency of wealth, adjusting your consciousness to broadcast abundance rather than lack, learning to speak the language that prosperity recognizes and responds to. Write in the comments, consciousness creates wealth. If this perspective is shifting how you understand where prosperity actually comes from and what you need to focus on to transform your financial reality. What makes this discovery so profoundly liberating is its completely democratic nature. You don't need startup capital sitting in a bank account. You don't need connections to influential people who can open doors for you. You don't need credentials from prestigious institutions or permission from any external authority to begin this transformation. The only requirement is becoming conscious of the linguistic commands you've been issuing unconsciously for years and making the decision to deliberately reprogram them to align with the frequency that wealth responds to. This levels the playing field in a way that no economic policy or social program ever could, because you're working at the level of consciousness itself, the source from which all external circumstances eventually flow. The barrier to entry isn't financial or social, it's awareness. Most people never even realize that their words are commands being executed by an intelligent universe. They go through life thinking language is just neutral communication, harmless expression of thoughts and feelings. They have no idea they're operating a powerful creative mechanism that's producing their reality with mathematical precision. Once you become aware of this mechanism, once you see clearly how your habitual phrases have been programming your experience, you gain access to a power that requires no external resources whatsoever. You can start right now, in this moment, regardless of your current bank balance or circumstances. The transformation begins the instant you choose to speak differently. Now, you might be wondering why, if this knowledge is so powerful and so accessible, it hasn't been shouted from rooftops and taught in every school. Why was the manuscript kept circulating quietly among select groups instead of being published widely for everyone to benefit from? The answer reveals something important about the responsibility that comes with this level of creative power. When the first practiced principles and watched their financial realities transform in ways that seemed almost impossible, they faced a profound ethical dilemma. Should they share this knowledge openly with the world, or should they guard it carefully, passing it only to those who demonstrated readiness? They chose protection over proliferation, and not because they were greedy or wanted to hoard wealth for themselves. They chose protection because they witnessed something concerning. People who learned these principles without proper foundation, without understanding the immense responsibility that comes with commanding reality through words, often created chaos in their own lives. They manifested wealth without developing the consciousness to sustain it, leading to cycles of dramatic gain, followed by equally dramatic loss that were more psychologically devastating than consistent limitation. They discovered they could influence circumstances, but without wisdom about how to wield that influence, they often made decisions that served short-term desires while undermining long-term well-being. The gatekeepers understood something most people don't want to hear. Once you truly grasp that your words are commands being executed by the universe, you can never unknow that truth. You become responsible for every outcome you're experiencing. There's no one else to blame, no external circumstances to hide behind. That level of accountability terrifies most people far more than poverty itself. It's easier to believe you're a victim of the economy, your upbringing, bad luck, or unfair systems than to accept that you've been unconsciously creating your limitations through the frequency you've been broadcasting. The manuscript requires you to step into a level of personal responsibility that most people aren't prepared for without significant internal development first. This is why the knowledge moved through society like an underground river, surfacing occasionally in the lives of those who'd reached a point of genuine readiness, who'd been humbled enough by struggle to be open, or elevated enough by insight to be receptive. The transformation this sacred text offers isn't gentle or comfortable. It demands that you confront every limiting belief, every excuse, every way you've been playing small and blaming external factors. It asks you to recognize that if your words have been creating your current reality, then you have the power to create a different reality, which means you can no longer pretend you're powerless. The question isn't whether this knowledge works. The early practitioners proved conclusively that it does. The question is whether you're ready to step into the power and responsibility it offers, whether you're prepared to become conscious of the creative mechanism you've been operating unconsciously, whether you're willing to take full ownership of the reality your spirit has been aligning with through every word you speak. Write in the comments, "I accept this responsibility," if you're ready to stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start recognizing yourself as the conscious creator of your financial reality through the frequency you choose to broadcast. The programming that's been shaping your financial reality didn't begin when you got your first job or opened your first bank account. It started far earlier, in those formative years when your consciousness was just waking up to the world around you. From your earliest moments of awareness, you were immersed in what can only be described as linguistic poverty. Phrases repeated so often they became the bedrock of your entire relationship with money. Money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. You have to work hard for every penny. Rich people are greedy. There's never enough to go around. These statements probably sound familiar because you heard them hundreds, maybe thousands of times during childhood. But here's what nobody told you then, and what most people still don't realize now. These weren't just casual observations about how the world works. They were instructions, commands being downloaded directly into your subconscious mind during the most impressionable period of your development. Your young brain, operating in a highly suggestible state, absorbed these phrases as absolute truth about the nature of reality. It didn't question them or analyze them or consider whether they might be limiting beliefs rather than universal laws. It simply accepted them, filed them away as foundational programming, and began executing them with perfect precision from that day forward. This is generational programming at its most insidious. Your parents likely learned the same limiting language from their parents, who learned it from their parents before them, creating an unbroken chain of poverty consciousness passed down through family lines like genetic inheritance. Except this inheritance isn't biological, it's linguistic and psychological, which means it can be interrupted and reprogrammed once you become aware of it. The tragedy is that most people never become aware. They spend their entire lives operating according to programming installed before they were old enough to question it. Then they pass that same programming to their children, ensuring the cycle continues indefinitely. Now, I want to go even deeper into why this programming exists in the first place and who benefits from keeping it active in your consciousness. The scarcity narrative you've been fed your entire life serves a very specific purpose in maintaining social structures and power dynamics. When you believe at your core that resources are fundamentally limited, that there's not enough to go around, that you have to fight and compete for your small slice of an insufficient pie, something profound happens to your psychology and behavior. You become compliant. You accept conditions you would never choose if you understood the creative power you actually possess. Think about it. Someone who believes abundance is their natural state, who knows they can create opportunities through consciousness and language, who understands they're not dependent on external systems for their prosperity, is very difficult to control. They're unpredictable. They make choices based on internal alignment rather than external pressure. They're willing to walk away from situations that don't serve them because they trust their ability to create new opportunities. But someone trapped in scarcity consciousness, they're manageable. They'll accept low wages because at least it's something. They'll tolerate toxic work environments because I need this job to survive. They'll stay in situations that slowly destroy them because scarcity has convinced them they have no alternatives. The system doesn't need to explicitly conspire to keep you poor. It just needs to keep broadcasting the scarcity frequency through media, education, cultural narratives, and family conditioning. Once that frequency is installed in your consciousness, you police yourself, you limit yourself, you make choices from fear rather than possibility. You teach your children the same limiting language you were taught, perpetuating the cycle without anyone having to force you. The prison is invisible because it's made of words and beliefs rather than bars and walls, but it's just as effective at containing you within predetermined boundaries. Breaking free from this generational programming isn't about rebelling against your parents or rejecting your upbringing. It's about recognizing that the people who installed this language in you were themselves. Operating from programming they never questioned. They genuinely believed they were teaching you truth, preparing you for a harsh world, protecting you from disappointment. They had no idea they were passing along spiritual and linguistic chains that would bind your financial reality for decades. The liberation comes when you see the mechanism clearly, when you understand that these inherited beliefs aren't universal truths, but merely one possible frequency among infinite possibilities. Write in the comments, I break the cycle now, if you're recognizing how generational programming has been limiting your prosperity and you're ready to choose a different frequency than the one you inherited. The most profound shift the sacred manuscript demands of you is this: stop thinking about money as a physical thing, as paper in your wallet or numbers on a screen, and start recognizing it for what it actually is: crystallized energy, a flowing current that moves through the universe constantly. seeking channels capable of conducting it efficiently. This isn't poetic metaphor or spiritual fluff. Think about electricity for a moment. It doesn't struggle or strain to find its path. It naturally flows toward conductors and away from insulators, always taking the route of least resistance. Money operates according to the same principle. It's drawn toward people and situations that offer the least resistance, that don't block its movement with fear, doubt, contradiction, and limiting beliefs. When you grip money tightly with desperation, when you approach it from a place of, "I need this" or "I'm doomed," you're actually creating massive resistance. You become an insulator rather than a conductor. Your consciousness is broadcasting a frequency of lack so powerfully that the flow of financial energy literally cannot reach you. It's being repelled before it even gets close, redirected toward channels that are more open, more receptive, more aligned with its natural movement. This is why people who are relaxed about money, who maintain an easy confidence about their ability to create and receive, often experience what others call luck or privilege. They're not lucky. They've just removed the internal resistance that blocks most people from conducting the flow. Your consciousness operates exactly like a radio station, constantly broadcasting a signal out into the field of infinite potential. Right now, in this very moment, you're tuned to a specific frequency, and that frequency determines entirely what you're capable of receiving. If you're broadcasting on the poverty consciousness channel, if your internal radio is set to the frequency of limitation and struggle, then you are literally, physically unable to receive the abundance transmissions that are available all around you at every single moment. It's not that the opportunities don't exist. It's not that prosperity isn't trying to reach you. It's that you're tuned to the wrong station, so the signals pass right by without ever registering in your awareness. Imagine standing in a room where 10 different radio stations are broadcasting simultaneously. Music, talk shows, news, everything is there in the air around you at the same moment. But your radio can only pick up what it's tuned to. If you're set to the frequency that broadcasts poverty programming, that's all you'll hear, regardless of what else is available. You could be surrounded by opportunities, standing in a space thick with abundance potential, connected to people who could completely transform your financial reality, and you won't perceive any of it because your receiver isn't calibrated to that wavelength. The opportunities will appear invisible to you. The connections will seem irrelevant. The possibilities will look impossible, all because you're operating on a frequency that can't detect them. This is the hidden mechanism behind why two people can attend the same networking event, hear the same presentation, receive the same information, and walk away with completely different results. One person's consciousness is tuned to abundance frequency, so they notice the subtle cues, recognize the potential, feel drawn to make connections that lead somewhere significant. The other person is tuned to limitation frequency, so they literally don't see what the first person saw, don't hear what the first person heard. Their radio is playing a completely different program, even though they're in the exact same room, exposed to the exact same circumstances. The transformation that's available through the sacred manuscript isn't about changing your external world first and hoping your internal state follows. It's about deliberately tuning your consciousness to a different frequency, adjusting your internal radio station to broadcast abundance rather than scarcity, and then watching as your external reality reorganizes itself to match your new signal. You're not forcing anything. You're not manipulating circumstances. You're simply becoming a conductor rather than an insulator, opening yourself to receive the flow that's been trying to reach you all along but couldn't get through the resistance you'd unknowingly erected. The practical question becomes, how do you tune your radio? How do you shift from poverty frequency to prosperity frequency when the old station has been playing automatically for decades? The answer lies in the precise linguistic reprogramming the manuscript provides, the specific words and phrases that act as frequency adjusters, gradually shifting your broadcast from one wavelength to another until you're finally receiving the transmissions that have always been there, waiting for someone tuned correctly to receive them. Write in the comments, "I'm tuning to abundance," if you're starting to understand that your lack of prosperity might not be about missing opportunities, but about operating on a frequency that makes opportunities invisible to your current consciousness. Everything you've been taught about the sequence of prosperity is backwards, and this inversion is precisely why so many people work themselves to exhaustion without ever experiencing the abundance they're chasing. You were raised to believe the path goes like this: work hard, sacrifice, struggle, grind for years, accumulate money, and then finally, maybe, if you've done everything right, you'll get to enjoy abundance and feel secure. This formula has been repeated so often, it feels like universal law, like the only possible way things could work. But the sacred manuscript reveals that this sequence is completely inverted, and following it guarantees you'll remain trapped in struggle regardless of how hard you work. The actual order of manifestation runs in the opposite direction entirely. First, you must embody the vibrational frequency of abundance within your consciousness, cultivating that felt sense of prosperity before it shows up in your bank account. Then, from that elevated state, you take inspired action that flows naturally rather than forced effort that drains you. And finally, as a consequence of operating from this frequency, money appears, resources materialize, opportunities present themselves. Abundance isn't the destination you arrive at after decades of struggle. It's the starting point from which all successful creation originates. You must become abundant internally before prosperity can manifest externally. This sounds completely backwards to logical thinking, which is exactly why most people never discover it. Logic says you need money first, then you can feel abundant. But consciousness operates according to different laws than logic. When you're vibrating at the frequency of lack, when you're taking action from a place of desperation and insufficiency, everything you do is contaminated by that energy. You might work 18-hour days, follow every expert strategy, network relentlessly, and still watch success slip through your fingers. Not because you're not working hard enough, but because the frequency you're broadcasting is constantly declaring, "I don't have enough, I'm not enough, there's never enough." And the universe keeps reflecting that exact reality back to you with absolute accuracy. But shift the frequency first. Align your spirit with abundance consciousness through deliberate linguistic and spiritual practice, and suddenly the same actions produce radically different results. The same conversation that would have gone nowhere becomes a connection that changes everything. The same business idea that flopped before suddenly catches fire. The same skills you've always possessed become recognized and valued in ways they never were previously. Nothing changed externally. The entire transformation happened at the frequency level, in that invisible realm where all physical manifestation originates before it becomes visible. Now, I want to go even deeper into the actual mechanism of how this frequency creates reality, because understanding the theory is one thing, but grasping how it operates in your consciousness moment to moment is what actually transforms your financial experience. Your brain, that magnificent processing system running constantly in the background of your awareness, doesn't distinguish between a thought you're casually thinking and a command you're deliberately issuing. This distinction is crucial to understand. When you think, "I never have enough money," your subconscious mind doesn't interpret that as a complaint, an observation, or a temporary feeling you're expressing. It receives it as a direct instruction, a command to maintain that exact condition of insufficiency. your nervous system, your decision-making apparatus, your perception of what's possible, all of it immediately calibrates to ensure the thought you just had becomes the reality you continue experiencing. It's a closed loop, a self-fulfilling prophecy that runs with ruthless efficiency. Every time you think a thought about money, you're essentially programming your future, issuing orders to the quantum field about what to manifest in your experience. The tragedy is that most people have no idea this mechanism even exists. They think thoughts are just mental chatter, harmless internal commentary that doesn't affect anything real or tangible. So they allow their minds to run completely wild with limitation narratives, worry about bills, anxiety about not having enough, fear about the future, never realizing they're sitting at the control panel of their financial destiny, randomly pressing buttons that keep creating the same painful outcomes over and over. Every worry about bills is a command to manifest more bills. Every fear about insufficiency is an instruction to perpetuate lack. Every belief that money is hard to obtain is a program ensuring it will remain difficult. The universe isn't judging these thoughts as good or bad. It's simply executing them as commands with the same precision that your computer executes the code you input. This is why affirmations alone often fail. You can stand in front of a mirror repeating "I am wealthy" all day. But if underneath that conscious repetition, your subconscious is running programs of unworthiness, limitation, and fear, the subconscious programming wins every single time. You need to go deeper than surface words. You need to reprogram at the level where you're actually operating. Instructions are stored and executed, where your thoughts automatically generate commands that shape your experienced reality. Write in the comments, "My thoughts create my reality," if you're beginning to recognize how your habitual thinking patterns might have been commanding the exact financial limitations you've been trying to escape. What I'm about to share with you might sound like mystical thinking until you understand the hard science behind it. Every single word you speak creates a literal physical imprint in reality, not metaphorically or symbolically, but actually and measurably. Scientists studying cymatics, the visualization of sound and vibration, have demonstrated something extraordinary. When you generate sound waves at different frequencies, they create distinct geometric patterns in physical matter. You can watch this happen in real time as sand or water arranges itself into intricate designs based solely on the frequency being played. Each tone produces a unique pattern, a specific organization of matter that directly corresponds to the vibration being transmitted. Your words are doing exactly the same thing to the invisible field of potential surrounding you at every moment. When you speak, you're generating sound waves that carry specific frequencies, and those frequencies interact with the quantum field, organizing it into patterns that eventually solidify into your lived experience. This isn't speculation or spiritual philosophy. This is observable physics applied to consciousness. The words "I am abundant" carry a completely different vibrational signature than the words "I am broke," and each signature organizes the field into correspondingly different patterns. One creates geometric formations aligned with prosperity, the other with lack, and over time, these invisible patterns manifest as your tangible circumstances. Think about the implications of this for a moment. Every conversation you have, every internal dialogue running through your mind, every declaration you make about money is literally sculpting the fabric of your reality at the quantum level. You're not just talking, you're creating. You're not just expressing thoughts, you're issuing vibrational commands that organize formless potential into specific forms that will eventually appear in your physical experience. The words you spoke yesterday are still rippling through the field, shaping what's coming toward you tomorrow. The phrases you repeat daily are building structures in the invisible realm that will eventually solidify into visible circumstances. But the impact goes even deeper than external effects on the quantum field. Inside your brain, something equally profound is happening through the mechanism of neuroplasticity. Every time you repeat a thought or phrase, you're creating physical pathways in your neural tissue, actual biological structures that didn't exist before. Say, "I can't afford it" enough times, and your brain doesn't just remember those words. It builds a dedicated neural superhighway for that exact thought pattern, complete with exit ramps and connections to related limiting beliefs. The pathway becomes so well established, so automatic, that the thought fires without any conscious decision on your part. These neural grooves become deeper with each repetition, like water carving channels through stone over time. Eventually, the pathway is so entrenched that it becomes your default response, the automatic route your thoughts travel whenever you encounter anything related to money and desire. You don't even notice you're taking that path anymore. It feels natural, inevitable, like truth itself, rather than what it actually is. A well-worn habit that's been reinforced thousands of times through unconscious repetition. The devastating part is that once these pathways are established, they feel like reality, like accurate descriptions of how the world works, when really they're just the most traveled routes in your mental landscape. This is why changing your financial reality through willpower alone rarely works. You're trying to override decades of neural programming with conscious effort, which is like trying to redirect a river with your bare hands. The established pathways are so strong, so automatic, that they pull your thoughts back into familiar patterns before you even realize what's happening. You might consciously decide to think more positively about money, but within hours or days, you find yourself right back in the old grooves, thinking and speaking in the same limiting ways you've always used, because those neural highways are the path of least resistance for your brain. The transformation the sacred manuscript offers isn't about fighting these pathways with force or trying to suppress the old patterns through sheer determination. It's about deliberately creating new neural pathways through consistent, intentional linguistic practice, building alternative routes that eventually become just as automatic as the old ones. You're not erasing the old highways, you're constructing new ones and choosing to travel them so consistently that your brain eventually makes them the new default, the new automatic response. This is genuine reprogramming at the neurological level, physical transformation of your brain's structure through strategic use of language and repetition aligned with prosperity consciousness rather than limitation. The words you choose today aren't just affecting your mood or your mindset. They're literally rewiring your brain, organizing the quantum field, and constructing the blueprint for what will manifest in your financial experience in the coming weeks and months. Every phrase is either reinforcing the old architecture of lack or building new structures of abundance. Write in the comments, "I'm building new pathways," if you're recognizing how repetition has created neural grooves that make limitation feel like truth, and you're ready to deliberately construct new routes aligned with prosperity. The practical application of everything we've discussed comes down to learning precise reformulations, exact linguistic shifts that transform limitation commands into possibility activators. The sacred manuscript doesn't leave you guessing about how to speak differently. It provides specific replacements for every common poverty phrase that's been programming your reality. Take that reflexive statement you've probably said hundreds of times. "I can't afford it." Those 4 words are a command that shuts down all creative thinking, closes every door of possibility, and instructs your brain that this particular desire is completely off limits, not worth investigating. End of discussion. The reformulation the manuscript teaches transforms that closed statement into an open question. How can I create the resources to acquire this if I really want it? Notice what just happened in that shift. You didn't pretend you currently have money you don't have. You didn't deny your present circumstances or engage in false positivity. You simply changed the structure from a statement that closes possibility to a question that opens it. And questions are inherently creative. When you ask your brain a genuine question, it cannot resist searching for answers. It's a biological imperative hardwired into your neurology. Your mind goes to work immediately, recruiting your subconscious intelligence, your pattern recognition systems, your problem-solving capabilities, all the vast processing power operating beneath your conscious awareness. Solutions you would never have considered start bubbling up from that subconscious realm. Opportunities you would have missed entirely suddenly become visible. Connections form that wouldn't have formed before simply because you asked a different question. Instead of commanding your reality to remain closed with "I can't," you've opened a doorway and invited creative solutions to walk through. This isn't word games or semantic tricks to make yourself feel better temporarily. This is strategic reprogramming of how you interface with the field of infinite potential, transforming yourself from someone who broadcasts impossibility into someone who radiates openness to solutions. The manuscript is filled with these precise reformulations. Money is tight becomes, I'm learning to open myself to greater flow. I always struggle financially transforms into, I'm developing a new relationship with abundance. That's too expensive shifts to, that's not my current priority, but I'm curious what it would take to make it one. Each reformulation maintains honesty about where you are while simultaneously creating space for where you're going. You're not lying to yourself or denying reality. You're choosing to speak from possibility rather than limitation, from expansion rather than contraction, from the frequency that attracts rather than repels. Now, I want to go even deeper into the systematic approach the sacred text provides for implementing these shifts, because knowing the theory and actually transforming your habitual patterns are two entirely different things. Years of automatic limiting language can't be undone with casual effort or sporadic attention. You need something structured enough to create real neurological change, but flexible enough to integrate into your actual daily life. This is where the manuscript's transformation protocol becomes invaluable. A 7-day journey designed to dismantle your financial programming layer by layer while installing new patterns that actually serve your prosperity. This protocol works because it doesn't ask you to change everything simultaneously, which would overwhelm your nervous system and trigger massive resistance that would sabotage the entire process. Instead, it focuses your attention on one specific aspect of your linguistic programming each day, allowing you to go deep, to really observe and transform that particular pattern before moving to the next. The first day is pure observation, no attempt to change anything yet, just becoming aware of every limiting phrase you speak or think about money, noting them without judgment, building consciousness around patterns that have been running invisibly in the background of your life for decades. This awareness alone begins shifting things immediately because you literally cannot unsee what you've seen. Once you recognize how often you declare limitation, how automatically these phrases flow from your mouth, how deeply these patterns run, something fundamental changes in your relationship to those words. They lose their invisible power. They become conscious choices rather than unconscious defaults. Each subsequent day builds on the previous one systematically, introducing specific reformulations, practicing them in targeted contexts, feeling how different words carry different energy in your body, noticing how reality begins responding differently to your new transmissions. By day 3, you're noticing opportunities you would have missed entirely just days earlier. By day 5, people respond to you differently, as if they can sense a shift in your energetic field, even though you haven't explicitly told them anything about what you're doing. By day 7, the new patterns have started feeling natural, no longer requiring constant conscious effort, but beginning to run automatically, replacing the old. Destructive programming with language that creates what you actually want rather than what you've been unconsciously commanding for years. Write in the comments, Day 1 starts now, if you're ready to commit to this systematic transformation and discover how radically your financial reality can shift when you deliberately reprogram the linguistic commands that have been shaping it. That first day of observation might sound deceptively simple, but it's where the real excavation of your consciousness begins. You're not trying to fix anything yet, not forcing yourself to speak differently or think more positively. You're simply watching yourself with the curiosity of a scientist studying a fascinating specimen, becoming aware of every limiting phrase that passes through your mind or comes out of your mouth when money is involved. What exact words do you use? What emotions accompany them? Does your chest tighten when you look at prices? Does your stomach drop when bills arrive? Does a flash of shame or anxiety wash over you when someone mentions their financial success? This isn't about judging yourself for having these reactions or feeling guilty about the limiting language you discover. It's about finally seeing the invisible operating system that's been running your financial life from the shadows, directing every decision and perception without your conscious awareness. Most people are genuinely shocked by what they uncover on this first day of observation. They had absolutely no idea how much negativity, how much limitation, how much unconscious poverty programming they were carrying in their everyday language about money. They catch themselves saying, "I'm so broke," as a casual joke with friends, not realizing their subconscious doesn't understand humor and simply files that declaration away as truth to be maintained. They notice themselves thinking, "Here we go again," when unexpected expenses appear, reinforcing a narrative of perpetual financial struggle that becomes more entrenched, more real, with each repetition. The awareness alone, without changing a single word yet, begins creating cracks in the prison walls. You start to see the bars that have been containing you, and once you see them clearly, they lose some of their power to hold you. This is why observation is the essential first step, the foundation upon which all subsequent transformation is built. You cannot reprogram what you're not aware of. You cannot choose different language if you don't first notice the language you've been using automatically. Now, I want to go even deeper into what your current financial reality is actually showing you, because this revelation might be the most uncomfortable truth the sacred manuscript forces you to confront. Your bank account, your income level, your debt situation, none of it is primarily showing you how the economy is performing, or how unfair the system is, or how unlucky you've been. What it's showing you, with brutal honesty and perfect accuracy, is exactly how you feel about yourself at the deepest level, the level you probably don't want to acknowledge or examine too closely. Money functions as a merciless mirror, reflecting back the value you assign to your own existence, your contributions, your right to occupy space in this world and receive good things. Most people, when they finally see this reflection clearly, when they really look at what their financial circumstances are telling them about their internal state, realize they've been unconsciously declaring themselves unworthy of prosperity for decades. Not through conscious choice, but through inherited programming, through absorbed beliefs about what someone with their background or history or characteristics deserves. The mirror doesn't lie, it doesn't flatter, it shows you exactly what frequency you've been broadcasting about your own worth, and it manifests circumstances that match that frequency with mathematical precision. This is why all the external strategies fail if you haven't addressed the internal relationship with your own value. You can learn brilliant investment techniques, follow the smartest business models, network with all the right people, But if underneath all that activity there's a quiet voice saying, I don't really deserve this, or people like me don't get to have that kind of wealth, then no amount of external action will create lasting abundance. The mirror will keep reflecting your internal state, manifesting circumstances that confirm your deepest beliefs about what you're worth and what you're allowed to receive. Think about how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening, that constant internal monologue running in the background of your consciousness. Is it kind? Is it encouraging? Does it affirm your value and potential? Or is it critical, harsh, perpetually finding fault and inadequacy? That voice isn't just commentary on your life. It's the primary signal you're broadcasting to the field of infinite potential, and that field responds by organizing your reality around whatever that voice is declaring as truth about you. If the voice says you're not smart enough, not talented enough, not worthy enough, then life will present you with endless confirmation of that verdict, not because the universe is cruel, but because it's responding precisely to your broadcast. The journey to sustainable wealth requires healing this fundamental relationship with your own value first. You cannot cheat the mirror. You cannot fake your way past it with surface affirmations while carrying deep unworthiness underneath. The field reads your authentic signal, the one encoded in how you truly feel about yourself when all the masks are removed, and it manifests accordingly. Write in the comments, I am worthy of wealth, if you're beginning to recognize that your financial struggles might be reflecting an internal conflict about your own value that needs to be addressed, before external prosperity can establish itself permanently. The healing work required here goes far deeper than most people want to acknowledge. You can't paste positive affirmations over a foundation of unworthiness and expect lasting transformation. The field of infinite potential isn't fooled by surface-level declarations that contradict your authentic, internal frequency. It reads what's actually broadcasting from the depths of your consciousness, the beliefs you hold about yourself when nobody's watching, when you're alone with your thoughts in the quiet moments. Transformation at this level requires rebuilding your sense of value from the ground up, excavating the inherited shame, the internalized criticism, the absorbed messages about not being enough that have been running silently in your operating system since childhood. This rebuilding process isn't comfortable or quick. It demands that you confront every way you've been diminishing yourself, every time you've accepted less than you deserve, every instance where you stayed silent when you should have spoken up for your value. The sacred manuscript provides specific practices for this deep work, techniques for dissolving the shame that's been blocking your prosperity, releasing beliefs about being undeserving that you absorbed before you were old enough to question them. It's not just about changing what you say about money. It's about transforming how you perceive your own essence, your fundamental right to exist and thrive and receive from an abundant universe that's been trying to give you so much more than you've been allowing yourself to accept. What makes this internal work so crucial is the amplification effect that money provides. Whatever you believe about yourself at the deepest level gets magnified and made visible through your financial circumstances with startling clarity. If you secretly believe you're a fraud who doesn't deserve success, if there's a hidden conviction that you're somehow fundamentally flawed or less valuable than others, money will create situations where that belief gets exposed. A business opportunity falls through at the last moment. An unexpected expense drains whatever you've accumulated. A promotion goes to someone else, despite your qualifications. These aren't random events or cosmic punishment. They're your internal frequency being amplified until it becomes impossible to ignore. The universe isn't being cruel or unfair when this happens. It's actually offering you a profound gift, making your invisible beliefs visible so you finally have to address them. The amplification continues, the mirror keeps reflecting until you either heal the underlying wound or resign yourself to perpetual limitation. Most people choose resignation because healing requires courage they don't think they have. They decide their financial struggles are just how life is for people like them, accepting the prison rather than doing the uncomfortable work of examining the beliefs that built it. Conversely, when you genuinely feel worthy at the cellular level, when you know without doubt that you're a valuable expression of consciousness deserving of abundance, money flows toward you and stays with you because there's no internal contradiction pushing it away. You're not constantly sabotaging your success to prove your unworthiness correct. You're not creating unconscious obstacles to validate your limiting beliefs. You're allowing the natural flow of prosperity to reach you because your internal frequency is saying, yes, I receive this, I'm worthy of this aligns with who I actually am. The diagnostic power of this mirror effect is extraordinary once you understand how to read it. You can look at your current financial situation and reverse engineer exactly what beliefs are operating in your subconscious mind, running the show beneath your conscious awareness. Your income ceiling, the level you can never seem to break through, no matter what you try, is showing you precisely what you believe you're worth. Your debt patterns reveal your relationship with owing versus owning, with being behind versus being ahead. Your inability to save money demonstrates beliefs about scarcity and the need to spend what you have before it disappears. Every financial pattern is a breadcrumb trail leading back to specific beliefs about yourself and your value in the world. Once you see this connection clearly, once you understand that changing your financial reality fundamentally requires changing your relationship with yourself first, the entire game shifts from feeling hopeless to becoming completely solvable. You're no longer trying to fix external circumstances while ignoring the internal frequency that's creating them. You're going to the source, addressing the beliefs at the root level where they're actually generating your experienced reality. This is deeper work than learning investment strategies or business tactics, but it's the only work that produces transformation, rather than temporary improvements that eventually collapse back to your baseline. Now, the practical question becomes, how do you actually rebuild this sense of worth when it's been damaged or suppressed for decades? How do you convince your subconscious that you're valuable when it's been running programs of inadequacy since childhood? The answer lies in systematic reprogramming that operates beneath conscious resistance, installing new beliefs at the same foundational level where the limiting ones have been stored and executed. Write in the comments, I reclaim my worth, if you're ready to stop letting inherited unworthiness dictate your financial reality and begin the deep work of rebuilding your sense of value from the foundation upward. The sacred manuscript introduces a technique that sounds completely counterintuitive to everything you've been taught about achievement. But once you understand the physics of manifestation, it makes perfect sense. Instead of chasing money with the desperate, frantic energy of someone running after a bus they're terrified of missing, you learn to create what the text calls an energetic void, a spaciousness within your consciousness that abundance rushes to fill naturally, effortlessly, like air filling a vacuum. This isn't passive resignation or sitting around waiting for miracles. It's the active practice of releasing the death grip you've had on outcomes, the white-knuckled grasping that's been pushing prosperity away from you for years without you even realizing it. Think about how magnets work for a moment. You never see a magnet frantically chasing after metal, running around trying to capture it through force and determination. The magnet simply exists in its natural magnetic state, radiating its inherent field, and metal is drawn to it without any effort, without any struggle. That's the state the manuscript teaches you to cultivate within yourself, a magnetic and presence that doesn't pursue but attracts, that doesn't beg but receives, that doesn't desperately need but calmly expects. The shift from pursuer to magnet is one of the most profound transformations you can undergo in your relationship with money, and it happens entirely through the words you choose and the energetic stance those words create in your consciousness. Desperation carries a specific frequency that money can detect from a considerable distance, and it runs in the opposite direction. Every single time, when you approach opportunities, negotiations, or financial decisions from a place of, "I need this," or "I'm doomed," you're broadcasting scarcity so loudly that people unconsciously pull back, deals mysteriously fall through, and circumstances rearrange themselves to confirm your deepest fear. It's not that the universe is against you or that you're cursed with bad luck. It's that desperation creates massive resistance, and resistance blocks the natural flow of abundance. You've essentially erected an invisible force field that repels the very thing you're trying so desperately to attract. The void technique teaches you to do something that feels almost dangerous at first, especially if you've been operating from survival mode for years. You release your attachment to specific outcomes while maintaining crystal clarity about what you want. You stop gripping so tightly that you're strangling the life out of your desires. You create internal space, a calm receptivity that communicates, "I'm open to receiving this or something even better, and I trust the intelligence of the universe to deliver it in perfect timing." This isn't about giving up your dreams or lowering your standards. It's about shifting from anxious manipulation to aligned allowing, from forcing against reality to flowing with it, from pushing and straining to opening and receiving. What happens when you create this void, this spaciousness in your consciousness, is genuinely fascinating to observe. Opportunities that would have required enormous effort to pursue suddenly present themselves without you looking for them. Money that felt stuck begins circulating. People who can help you appear in your life as if summoned by an invisible signal you didn't consciously send. The manuscript explains this through a principle from physics. Nature abhors a vacuum. Any empty space in the universe automatically draws in whatever is needed to fill it. By creating energetic space within your consciousness, by releasing the contracted, desperate energy of pursuit, you allow the natural flow of abundance to find its way to you without obstruction. This practice requires developing what the text calls relaxed certainty, a state where you're simultaneously unattached to specific timelines or methods while remaining absolutely certain about the eventual outcome. You stop anxiously checking your bank account every morning. You stop obsessing over when the next client will appear or where the money will come from. You stop calculating and scheming and trying to control every variable. Instead, you maintain the words, the thoughts, the energetic stance of someone who knows without any doubt that they're supported by an abundant universe, constantly orchestrating circumstances in their favor. The shift from chasing to attracting also fundamentally changes how you show up in every interaction. When you're no longer desperate, you negotiate from a position of genuine strength rather than fear-based weakness. When you're not grasping, people sense your groundedness and respond to you completely differently. When you've released the frantic energy of, "I need this to work or I'm screwed," you make clearer decisions, spot better opportunities, and avoid the mistakes that come from fear-based action. You become an entirely different person operating from an entirely different frequency, and your financial reality has no choice but to reorganize itself around this new signal. You're broadcasting into the field. Write in the comments, "I release the chase," if you're recognizing how desperate pursuit might have been, creating the exact resistance that's kept prosperity at a distance, and you're ready to cultivate magnetic presence instead. Relaxed certainty is one of those paradoxical states that sounds impossible until you actually experience it, and then it becomes the most natural way of being you can imagine. You're holding two seemingly contradictory truths. Simultaneously, complete detachment from how or when your abundance will manifest. combined with unshakable certainty that it absolutely will manifest. Most people can access one or the other, but not both at the same time. They're either attached and anxious, obsessively checking for results, or they're detached but secretly doubtful, pretending not to care while underneath they're terrified nothing will happen. Relaxed certainty transcends this false dichotomy entirely. When you embody this state, you stop performing those anxiety-driven rituals that have been consuming your mental energy. You don't wake up and immediately check your bank balance with that familiar knot in your stomach. You don't refresh your email compulsively hoping for the message that will save you. You don't mentally calculate and recalculate your finances, trying to force the numbers to work through sheer mental effort. All that frantic activity was never helping anyway. It was just your nervous system's attempt to create the illusion of control in a situation where control comes from an entirely different place, from the frequency you're broadcasting rather than the actions you're taking. Instead, you maintain the internal posture of someone who knows they're supported, who trusts that the universe is constantly arranging circumstances in their favor, who expects good things to flow toward them not through entitlement, but through alignment with the natural order of abundance. You make decisions from this grounded place of certainty rather than from panic. You speak about your financial future with calm confidence rather than desperate hope. You carry yourself through the world differently because you're no longer broadcasting the frequency of someone who's afraid they won't have enough. And that shift in your energetic stance, that transformation in how you're showing up, changes absolutely everything about how reality responds to you. Now, I want to go even deeper into understanding why struggle, that thing you've been taught is virtuous and necessary, actually repels the prosperity you're working so hard to attract. The more intensely you fight for money, the more aggressively you pursue it with that clenched, desperate energy, the more certainly it evades your grasp. This isn't some cosmic joke or unfair punishment. It's the precise functioning of how energy and frequency operate in manifestation. Struggle creates resistance. When you approach anything from a place of fight and force, when every fiber of your being is contracted with the energy of "I need this" or "I'm doomed," you're generating a magnetic field that pushes away exactly what you're chasing. Think about trying to catch a butterfly by running after it with a net, swinging wildly, completely focused on capture. The more aggressively you pursue, the more certainly it flies away from you, sensing the frantic energy and avoiding it instinctively. But sit still, become calm, radiate peace and openness, and sometimes that butterfly will land right on your shoulder without any effort on your part. Money operates according to the same energetic principle. It's drawn toward calm confidence and repelled by desperate struggle, not because it's conscious or making decisions, but because the frequencies are fundamentally incompatible. The struggle frequency broadcasts a very specific message into the quantum field. I don't have what I need, I'm terrified I never will, I'm fighting against my circumstances because they're unbearable. That signal creates an invisible barrier, a force field of resistance that deflects prosperity before it can reach you. You're essentially announcing to the universe that you're operating from lack, and the universe responds by continuing to reflect that state of lack back to you. The harder you fight, the stronger the resistance becomes, creating a vicious cycle where your effort actually guarantees the opposite of what you want. This is why you see people who work themselves to exhaustion, sacrificing everything, pushing themselves beyond reasonable limits in pursuit of wealth, and yet prosperity remains perpetually out of reach. It's not that they're not working hard enough. It's that they're working from the wrong frequency entirely. Their effort is contaminated by desperation, their actions are infused with fear, their entire approach is broadcasting struggle, and money simply doesn't respond to that signal. Meanwhile, there are others who seem to float effortlessly into abundance, as if opportunities find them rather than the other way around. They're not working less hard. They're working from alignment, from flow, from a frequency that attracts rather than repels. The transformation available to you isn't about working less or giving up on your goals. It's about learning to pursue your desires from a completely different energetic stance, one that feels like expansion rather than contraction, like opening rather than grasping, like trust rather than terror. When you release struggle and embrace aligned effort, when you let go of the death grip and open your hands to receive, everything shifts at the fundamental level where manifestation actually occurs. Write in the comments, "I choose flow over struggle," if you're beginning to see how your intense fighting for money might have been creating the exact resistance keeping it away, and you're ready to approach prosperity from an entirely different frequency. The distinction between aligned effort and struggle is subtle but absolutely crucial to understand if you want to transform your financial reality. From the outside, both might look like hard work, like dedication, like someone committed to their goals. But the internal experience couldn't be more different, and that internal experience determines everything about what you're able to manifest and sustain. Aligned effort feels energizing even when it's challenging, like swimming with a powerful current that's carrying you forward. You're still exerting yourself, still engaged, still working, but there's a sense of flow, of being supported, of moving in harmony with forces larger than yourself. Struggle, on the other hand, feels exhausting even when you're making progress, like dragging yourself through thick mud that's determined to hold you back. Same external appearance of effort, same hours invested, same dedication and commitment, but the internal frequency is completely different. And that frequency produces radically different outcomes. When you're in aligned effort, doors open more easily. People respond to you positively. Opportunities appear at exactly the right moment. When you're in struggle, you hit resistance at every turn. You feel like you're fighting against the universe itself, and even your successes feel hollow and temporary because they required so much force to achieve. The exhaustion you feel isn't proof that you're doing it right. It's feedback that you're rowing when you should be sailing, fighting when you should be flowing, operating against your natural design rather than with it. Most people have been so conditioned to believe that if something doesn't hurt, if it doesn't require grinding yourself down and sacrificing everything, then you haven't earned it and therefore don't deserve to keep it. This toxic belief guarantees that you'll either avoid ease entirely or unconsciously destroy any abundance that arrives without sufficient suffering attached to it. You'll find ways to make things harder than they need to be, to create problems where none existed, to ensure the struggle continues because your entire identity has become wrapped up in being someone who fights for everything they get. Breaking free from this addiction to struggle is one of the most liberating transformations you can experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into identifying where your actual zone of aligned effort exists, because most people spend their entire lives working in areas that were never meant for them, pursuing goals that looked good on paper but feel wrong in their soul. The zone where prosperity flows naturally isn't found through logical analysis or following what seems practical and safe. It exists at a very specific intersection, a sweet spot where three essential elements converge with perfect precision. Your natural talents, the things you're genuinely good at without excessive strain, the abilities that feel like expressions of who you are, rather than skills you had to force yourself to develop. Your authentic passions, what you'd be drawn to even without external reward. The activities that make you lose track of time because you're so absorbed in them. And market needs, what the world actually wants and will exchange value for, the problems people are actively seeking solutions to. When you find the place where these three circles overlap, when you discover work that deploys your natural gifts in Service of something you genuinely care about that people actually need. Prosperity stops being something you chase and becomes something that flows to you as the natural consequence of being fully yourself in service to others. You're not trying to convince anyone to value what you offer. You're simply showing up as yourself and discovering that who you are is exactly what certain people have been searching for. The exchange feels effortless because it's authentic, because there's no pretending, or forcing or trying to be something you're not in order to deserve abundance. Most people operate in only one or two of these circles, never finding the center where all three intersect. They're talented at something but hate doing it, so every day feels like slow death despite the paycheck. They're passionate about something but terrible at it, so they stay hobbyists rather than professionals. They've found market demand but have zero natural ability or interest in meeting it, so they're successful by conventional measures but dying inside. Any configuration missing one of the three elements creates that familiar sensation of struggle, of resistance, of working against yourself rather than with yourself. The manuscript provides specific exercises for discovering your unique zone of aligned effort, questions designed to cut through conditioning and programming to reveal what's actually true for you beneath all the shoulds and supposed tos. It teaches you to recognize the difference between resistance that comes from laziness, which needs to be pushed through, and resistance that comes from misalignment, which is your soul's way of screaming that you're moving in the wrong direction. One kind of resistance needs discipline to overcome. The other kind needs wisdom to honor by changing course entirely. Write in the comments, "I'm finding my alignment," if you're starting to recognize that the exhaustion you've been experiencing might not be necessary hardship, but a signal that you're working against your natural design rather than with it. The sacred manuscript uses a perfect analogy to illustrate the fundamental difference between these two approaches to creating prosperity. Imagine two people trying to cross the same body of water toward the same destination. One person is in a rowboat, using nothing but muscular force, pulling against the oars with everything they have, fighting the current, exhausting themselves with every stroke. They believe their personal strength is what creates movement, so they push harder, strain more, sacrifice their body and energy in the name of progress. And they do make progress, slowly, painfully, but at tremendous cost. They're always on the edge of burnout, never quite reaching their destination because the current they're fighting against is stronger than their individual will. The other person has learned to sail. They've studied wind patterns. They understand how to read the invisible forces moving through the environment. They know how to position their vessel to catch currents far more powerful than any human strength could generate. They're still engaged, still working, still making continuous adjustments to their position and their sails. But they're being carried by forces beyond themselves. They're covering exponentially greater distances with a fraction of the effort because they've learned to dance with reality rather than fight against it. Both people are working. Both are dedicated to reaching their destination. But one is operating in opposition to natural forces, while the other has learned to harness them. Your words and your consciousness determine which approach you're taking. When you speak from struggle consciousness, from limitation and fear, you're grabbing those oars and preparing for an exhausting battle. When you speak from flow consciousness, from abundance and trust, you're adjusting your sails to catch the winds of prosperity that are always blowing, always available, just waiting for someone who knows how to position themselves correctly. The transformation isn't about working less, it's about working with the grain of reality instead of against it, aligning yourself with currents that want to carry you forward rather than fighting upstream your entire life. Now, I want to go even deeper into the practical mechanism the sacred text provides for making this shift at the neurological level, because understanding the concept intellectually is valuable, But knowing how to reprogram your actual nervous system is what creates lasting transformation. The millionaire meditation the manuscript teaches isn't some vague visualization practice where you close your eyes and hope for the best. It's a precision instrument, carefully designed to hack your autonomic nervous system and create specific biochemical changes that make your brain extraordinarily receptive to new programming. The technique centers on a particular breathing rhythm that's been calibrated to trigger a cascade of neurological responses. When you breathe in a specific pattern, inhaling for a count of 4, holding for 7, exhaling for 8, you're doing something far more sophisticated than just relaxing. You're engaging your vagus nerve, that massive neural highway connecting your brain to your major organs, sending a signal that you're safe, that there's no threat present, that you can release the constant vigilance that keeps most people locked in survival mode. Your body responds by flooding your system with neurotransmitters that promote deep relaxation and openness, shifting your brainwaves from beta frequency, where your conscious mind dominates and resists, to alpha-theta states, where your subconscious becomes extraordinarily receptive to new instructions. In this altered state of consciousness, something remarkable happens. Your critical mind, the part that would normally reject statements like, "I am prosperous," as obviously false based on your current bank balance, temporarily steps aside. The gatekeeper goes on break, and in that window of reduced resistance, you can install new neural pathways, new default settings, new automatic responses to money that serve your expansion rather than your limitation. You're not fighting against decades of programming with willpower, trying to force yourself to think differently through sheer determination. You're slipping past the defenses and changing the code at the source level, where it actually determines your behavior and perception before conscious thought even gets involved. The manuscript provides the exact verbal formulas to use during this receptive state, words carefully crafted for their vibrational impact, their ability to bypass resistance and anchor new identity at the cellular level. You're not just thinking these words or repeating them mechanically. You're embodying them with all your senses engaged, feeling the confidence radiating from your chest, seeing abundance in your mind's eye with vivid detail, hearing the conversations you'd have as someone who naturally attracts wealth. The more sensory rich you make the experience, the more completely your brain accepts it as actual reality, and the more thoroughly it rewires itself to match that new programming. Write in the comments, "Rewiring begins now," if you're ready to move beyond intellectual understanding and start applying the actual neurological reprogramming techniques that transform at consciousness at the foundational level, where financial reality gets created. This specific breathing pattern isn't arbitrary or randomly chosen. The rhythm of inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8 has been precisely calibrated based on how your autonomic nervous system responds to different respiratory patterns. When you extend your exhale to be longer than your inhale, you're activating the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system, the part responsible for rest, recovery, and receptivity. You're essentially telling your body at a biochemical level that you're safe, that there's no danger present, that you can release the constant state of alert that's been your baseline for possibly years or decades. Most people live in chronic low-grade stress, constantly scanning for threats, always braced for the next financial crisis, perpetually operating in survival mode without even realizing it. This state keeps you locked at beta brainwave frequency, where your conscious mind is hyperactive, critical, and resistant to new information that contradicts your established worldview. The breathing pattern gently guides you out of that state and into alpha-theta frequencies, where the boundaries between conscious and subconscious become permeable, where new programming can actually take root instead of being rejected immediately by your inner skeptic. Your body responds to this shift by releasing a cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones that promote deep relaxation and openness. Stress hormones like cortisol decrease. Feel-good chemicals like serotonin and dopamine increase. Your heart rate variability improves, indicating that your nervous system has shifted into a state of coherence where all your biological systems are working in harmony rather than fighting against each other. This creates the perfect internal environment for the deep reprogramming work that follows, for installing new beliefs and patterns that will actually stick rather than evaporating the moment you return to normal consciousness. Now, I want to go even deeper into what happens during this receptive state when you engage with the visualization component of the practice. Your brain possesses an extraordinary characteristic that most people never learn to leverage. It cannot reliably distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and an actual lived experience. When you practice seeing yourself as someone who naturally attracts wealth, who speaks about money with ease and confidence, who receives opportunities effortlessly, your brain treats that imagined experience as real. It starts building the neural connections, the synaptic pathways, the information superhighways that would exist in someone who actually lives that reality day to day. You're literally constructing the brain architecture of a prosperous person inside your own skull, installing the hardware that wealth consciousness runs on. This isn't wishful thinking or pretending. This is deliberate neuroplasticity, the conscious use of your brain's ability to physically reshape itself based on repeated experience, whether that experience is happening in external reality or in the rich internal landscape of vivid imagination. The neurons don't know the difference. They fire and wire according to the patterns you're activating, regardless of whether those patterns are being triggered by actual events or by intensely focused visualization. The key is making the internal experience as sensorily rich as possible. You're not just vaguely thinking about being wealthy. You're feeling the confidence in your chest, that expansive sensation of knowing you're supported and valued. You're seeing specific scenes play out in vivid detail, noticing colors, textures, the expressions on people's faces as they respond to your abundant energy. You're hearing the conversations you'd have from this elevated state, the tone of your voice when you discuss opportunities, the words that flow naturally when you're operating from prosperity consciousness rather than lack. The more dimensions of sensory experience you engage, the more completely your brain accepts the visualization as actual memory rather than fantasy, and the more thoroughly it rewires itself to support that new reality. This rewiring doesn't happen in a single session. Your old patterns have deep roots, neural pathways worn smooth by decades of repetitive thought and behavior, but with consistent practice, usually within 3 to 4 weeks, something remarkable begins to shift. The new pathways become stronger, more automatic. The abundant identity starts feeling more natural than the limited one. The prosperous language becomes your default instead of something you have to consciously remember to use. You've essentially performed a software update on your consciousness, installing Prosperity OS, where Scarcity OS used to run everything, and the external world has no choice but to begin. Reflecting this internal transformation, people who commit to this practice consistently report strange experiences around the 3-week mark. They catch themselves speaking differently about money without trying. They notice opportunities they would have completely missed before. They make decisions from a place of abundance that their old self would have considered reckless, but that somehow work out perfectly. Their internal experience has shifted so dramatically that the external world appears different, not because it is different, but because they're finally perceiving dimensions of possibility that were always there, but previously invisible to their limitation-programmed awareness. Write in the comments, I'm building prosperity consciousness. If you're ready to commit to this daily neurological practice and discover how your brain can literally reconstruct itself to support the financial reality you've been seeking. The technique of deciding from your future self requires a deliberate act of consciousness that most people have never attempted. Yet once you understand how to do it, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for making aligned decisions in your present reality. You begin by closing your eyes and projecting your awareness forward in time to a specific point where the abundance you're seeking has already materialized completely. Not hoping it will happen, not visualizing it as a distant possibility, but actually positioning your consciousness at that future moment where prosperity is your lived reality, as natural and ordinary as breathing. From that elevated vantage point, you turn around and look back at your current situation, at the decision or challenge you're facing right now. Something fascinating happens in this perspective shift. The choice that seemed impossibly risky from your current state of limitation suddenly appears completely reasonable, even obvious, when viewed through the eyes of your future abundant self. The investment you were afraid to make, the opportunity you were about to dismiss out of fear, the negotiation you were going to avoid because you felt unworthy. All of it looks different when you're seeing it from a consciousness that's already crossed the bridge you're currently standing before. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. You're engaging in sophisticated neurological time travel that leverages how your brain actually processes temporal information. Your mind doesn't distinguish cleanly between past, present, and future at the neurological level. All of it exists simultaneously in your consciousness, accessible depending on where you direct your attention. By deliberately positioning yourself in a future state and making present decisions from that location, you're literally borrowing the wisdom, courage, and clarity of your evolved self and bringing it back to inform your current choices. The perceptual shift this creates is profound and immediate. Decisions that would normally trigger fear or hesitation suddenly feel natural, almost inevitable. Your energy field reorganizes itself around this future reality you've stepped into, and that reorganization broadcasts a completely different signal to the quantum field surrounding you. You're no longer vibrating at the frequency of someone hoping to become abundant someday. You're vibrating at the frequency of someone who already is abundant and is simply managing the practical details of that abundance. The universe reads that signal and responds accordingly, orchestrating circumstances to match the frequency you're now emitting. Now, I want to go even deeper into what the sacred manuscript reveals as the ultimate secret, the composite frequency code that money responds to with mathematical precision. Prosperity isn't attracted by any single element in isolation. It responds to a specific harmonic blend, a symphony of frequencies that must be playing simultaneously for the full effect to manifest. This composite includes internal alignment, that state where all parts of you are moving in the same direction without contradiction or self-sabotage, where your conscious desires and your subconscious programming are finally working together instead of fighting each other. It includes confident receptivity, that paradoxical ability to be simultaneously wide open and absolutely certain, receiving without grasping, allowing without collapsing into passivity. It requires unshakable self-valuation, that deep recognition of your inherent worth that isn't dependent on external validation, achievement, or anyone else's opinion about your value. Expansive gratitude forms another essential component, not the obligatory thankfulness you perform to check a spiritual box, but genuine appreciation that opens your energy field and puts you in natural resonance with abundance's fundamental frequency. And finally, recognition of universal flow, the understanding that you're not isolated or alone in your efforts, but connected to an intelligent system that's constantly organizing reality in response to your vibration. When all these elements align simultaneously, when you're broadcasting this composite frequency consistently rather than intermittently, prosperity manifestation stops being something you struggle toward and becomes as natural and automatic as breathing. The wealthy, whether they understand the mechanism consciously or not, maintain this frequency as their default setting, their baseline state of being. Often it was installed early through environment and upbringing, but the revolutionary insight the manuscript provides is that this frequency can be deliberately cultivated, systematically developed through precise practices and linguistic reprogramming. Regardless of what programming you inherited or what your current circumstances look like, you're not trying to become someone fundamentally different from who you are. You're tuning yourself to broadcast the exact signal that prosperity recognizes and responds to, aligning your spirit with the frequency that wealth naturally gravitates toward. This is the culmination of everything the sacred text has been teaching, the integration of all the principles and practices into a unified field of consciousness that makes abundance inevitable rather than uncertain. Write in the comments, "I embody the frequency," if you're sensing how all these elements work together as a complete system, and you're ready to align every aspect of your consciousness with the composite code that commands wealth into manifestation. The sacred manuscript uses an analogy so elegant, so perfect, that once you truly understand it, your entire approach to wealth transforms in a single moment of recognition. Imagine you desperately want apples, so you spend every day reaching for branches around you, trying to pluck fruit that doesn't belong to you, or worse, attempting to tape plastic apples to dead branches, hoping they'll somehow become real. This is exactly what most people do with money. They focus entirely on the fruit, on the external manifestation of abundance, while completely ignoring the only thing that actually produces fruit sustainably, the seed and the root system that feeds it. Your consciousness is the seed. Everything about your beliefs, your self-perception, your habitual language patterns, this is the genetic code embedded in that seed, the inevitable blueprint that determines what kind of tree grows and what fruit it eventually produces. You cannot plant an orange seed and expect apples, no matter how much you water it, fertilize it, pray over it, or follow expert gardening advice. The seed contains the destiny, the outcome encoded in its very structure before a single leaf appears above ground. If your consciousness is programmed with scarcity, limitation, and unworthiness, that's the seed you've planted in the soil of your life, and no amount of external action, no strategy or tactic or hustle will make it produce abundance. It's biologically impossible given the genetic code you're working with. The transformation happens when you stop obsessing over the fruit and start tending to the seed. When you redirect all that energy you've been wasting on grasping at external money toward cultivating internal abundance consciousness, everything shifts at the foundational level. You work on the soil of your subconscious, removing the toxic beliefs that would poison any seed trying to grow there. You water it with consistent practice, with the meditation techniques and linguistic reprogramming we've been exploring. You provide sunlight through exposure to elevated frequencies, through gratitude, through deliberate alignment with prosperity consciousness. And then, most challenging for people conditioned to constant doing, you wait with patient trust, allowing the natural process of growth that occurs invisibly beneath the surface before anything appears above ground. This waiting period is where most people abandon the process entirely. They've planted new seeds of abundant consciousness. They've started speaking differently and thinking differently, but their bank account hasn't transformed overnight. So they declare it's not working and return to their old patterns. They don't understand that the most crucial growth is happening underground, in the realm of identity and belief, in the neural rewiring and energetic recalibration that must occur before external circumstances can shift. The seed is splitting open, sending down roots, establishing the foundation for the tree that will eventually produce endless fruit. But because they can't see this invisible process with their physical eyes, they assume nothing is happening and give up right before the breakthrough. Now, I want to go even deeper into what this entire journey has actually been about, because the sacred manuscript reveals something that might completely reframe everything you thought you were seeking. This whole struggle with money that brought you to these teachings in the first place, this quest for financial abundance that's consumed so much of your mental and emotional energy, it was never really about money at all. Money has been the lure, the presenting symptom, the surface issue that got you moving. But what you've actually been seeking all along, what your soul has been crying out for beneath the financial anxiety, is something infinitely more profound. This is about your evolution as a conscious being. This is about awakening to your true nature that's been buried under layers of conditioning and limitation. This is about remembering who you actually are beneath all the programming society installed in you before you were old enough to question it. The quest for abundance that felt so external, so focused on material accumulation and financial security, was actually the universe's ingenious method of guiding you back home to yourself, to the recognition that you were never separate from prosperity in the first place. You are abundance, temporarily confused into believing you were something small and limited and unworthy. Every limitation you experienced, every financial struggle that frustrated you, every moment of lack that drove you to seek answers, all of it was perfectly designed to bring you to this exact moment of recognition. The money you've been chasing is simply the mirror showing you the reunion with your own essential nature. Write in the comments, "I remember my abundance." If this understanding is landing in your consciousness, if you're sensing that the transformation you seek isn't about becoming someone new, but about removing the barriers that have been blocking you from experiencing what you've always been. If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration, if you've allowed these insights about aligning your spirit with the frequency of wealth to settle into your consciousness, then you're clearly not someone who's casually interested in surface-level advice. You're genuinely committed to transformation at the deepest level, and that commitment is what separates those who change their reality from those who simply consume content and move on without applying anything. I create videos like this because I believe this knowledge should be accessible, that the spiritual and linguistic codes of prosperity shouldn't remain hidden among a privileged few who guard them jealously. If what we've uncovered together resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring these intersections between consciousness, language, and material abundance, then subscribe to this channel. This isn't just another collection of motivational content that makes you feel good temporarily. This is systematic unveiling of how reality actually works beneath the surface narratives we've all been fed, the real mechanisms that abundance responds to. For those of you who made it all the way to this moment, I'd genuinely love to know you're here. Write in the comments, "This message was meant for me," so I can see who's truly engaged with this level of understanding. Your presence matters. This isn't just you passively watching. We're building something together, a community of people who refuse to accept limitation as inevitable, who understand that prosperity begins with consciousness and expresses itself through aligned frequency. If this exploration created something inside you, that sense of recognition when truth speaks directly to truth, go ahead and hit that like button. It's not just about the algorithm, though that helps. It's about you declaring energetically that you're in alignment with these principles, that you're choosing to stand on the side of abundance consciousness rather than remaining in the old paradigm of struggle and scarcity. And there's a video right here that takes what we've discussed even deeper into practical application, showing you specific techniques you can implement immediately to start broadcasting the frequency that wealth recognizes. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey we've started together is just beginning to reveal its true depth.